Welcome along to the Bet Rivers Cricket Show. How's that with me, Ed Hawkins, Pro Cricket Picker, joined as ever by John Wright, Pro Cricket Picker, former Oz compiler. John, good to see you.
Yeah, well, Ed, yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. It's still a big game. This is your Ashes preview show for the fifth test from the Oval. It's still a big game. We're going to be saying that a lot. The Ashes cannot be regained by England, but frankly, if you're not English or Australian, you probably don't really care about that. You're still interested in what's been an epic series. Will there be a winner at the Oval? South London starts Thursday at 11 a.m. UK time. On this show, all the markets are going to be going through them for you for Bet Rivers, and we're going to be finding the best value. Quick shout out for your money line with Bet Rivers for your fifth test. England plus 130, the draw plus 290. I know what I'm going to say about that price. Australia plus 170. John set it up following what's gone on at Manchester since we were last here.
Yeah, well, obviously Australia are 2-1 up in the series. We had an epic game at Manchester where England effectively dominated the game, but were scuppered by bad weather. I mean, it was basically a 3-day test match. England dominated the whole game and would probably have won the game if the weather would have stayed fair, but it didn't. The last 2 days were effectively washed out. So Australia got away with a draw, and as a consequence, have retained the Ashes 2-1. England can't win, as you say, Ed. But I think what we learned so much from Manchester. I mean, Bazball was vindicated because there was a session there on day 2 where England just absolutely pummeled the Australian bowling. I think they went for 175 off of 25 overs. It was just ridiculous. And England totally dominated the match. But, I mean, it'd be interesting to see now going into this last match at the Oval, because England must be deflated, the fact that they can't now regain the Ashes, even though that they left a marker down there with Australia. But Australia, they've come to England. They're World Test champions. And they've regained the Ashes and they've retained the Ashes 2-1. So I think Australia will be happy, but I suppose not the way they'd want to celebrate after the Manchester Test match, because really the weather won the day there. England was scuppered by the weather and totally dominated that game.
Yeah, it's an interesting betting heat, isn't it, John? Because we've got the form book saying that England are the superior team at the moment. So they've dominated the fourth test and they won the third test as well at Headingley with a very strong performance. Australia came back into it, but England did well to win that game and they were the better side in that game. And this is just what a sort of a 5-match series is like, with the ebbs and the flows. And form can turn around in the series. And there's a lot of debate about England are being hard done by because they're the better team. Well, they're only the better team over the last 2 tests. The first 2 tests, Australia were the better team because, in my opinion, they had the better preparation. And England were slow to get to the party. But now they've found their feet and their rhythm. They're the better team, and that's been aided by the fact that Australia are on a really arduous schedule here. They've essentially played 5 back-to-back tests already following that World Test Championship against India at the start of the summer when England had their feet up. This is their 6th test in a row for some of them. Pat Cummins looked absolutely exhausted. Is that the key factor for you? Because I think that is what's pushing me towards England to win this test. The simple fact is that Australia, are out on their feet, really.
They are on their feet, but the caveat to that would be that there's a lot of this Australian side here that have never won a series in England, have they? And they're going to retire. I mean, your likes of Warner, this is going to be his last test match. Khawaja, this will be the last time he plays in England. And there'll be a few others there that will probably never play in England again. Australia have never won a series in England since 2001. So I think there's a lot of Australia have got a lot to play for, and I think with a lot of the press that's come out today saying that England a moral victory for England, I think Australia will want to win this, and they'll want to win the series 3-1 to say, well, we are the better side, we are World Test champions. So I think Australia have got a lot to play for, but it's a question of how you weigh it up. I mean, definitely the impetus is with England, but again, England have got a few players there that now played the whole series. I mean, Stuart Broad, for instance. I mean, we said on this show, Ed, I mean, he looks like he's going to play 5 Test matches, doesn't he? I mean, we thought that would be no chance at the beginning of the series. So I think there's a lot to weigh up with England. Obviously, there's the sentiment about James Anderson. I mean, effectively, this is going to be his last Test match. Does he play or doesn't he play? I mean, you could argue that he's took 4 wickets in the whole of the series, 76 apiece. He doesn't really deserve to be in the side. But will England go with sentiment and pick him for this last Test match? I think that's the key question to ask, Ed.
Yeah, England's bowling lineup is absolutely crucial. If they were able to say that Mark Wood was 100% fit, or they could be sure he was going to be bowling at high pace in this Test at the Oval, then he would play. I'm not sure whether Mark Wood plays. Now, Mark Wood has basically turned the series almost on its head on his own. Hasn't been able to get England level, but as damn close as you can get. Now, if Wood doesn't play, suddenly they've lost their X-factor player, and it could well be that Australia make that difference count. James Anderson, I don't think he should be near the team now, sad to say, but age catches up with all of us, John, doesn't it? You know, we can't keep going what we do. We can't keep going in the same way. Wicket at 75 apiece, just nowhere near good enough. Josh Tongue is ready to go. Is quicker. The Australians don't fancy him. He gets shape on the ball. I think he should play. I'm also a bit worried about Stuart Broad because I thought he looked a bit leggy at Old Trafford. And we talk about people talk about England being hard done by. Well, they had 71 overs to take those 10 Australia wickets. Now, if you'd told me that at the start of that innings with all the rain around, I would say England will win that Test. I think they didn't win it because some of their players are out on their feet, perhaps as well. Broad being one of them. I mean, how do you bet, John? I mean, are you gonna have a pick on the money line?
I think the money line's about right. I think England deserve to be favourites. I mean, I agree with you. The worry me is the bowling attack and who actually rocks up. I mean, as you said, the introduction of Woakes and Wood in this series. I mean, they've taken 23 wickets in 2 Test matches. They've sort of swung it around really. Now, if they're both fit, I'd like to think that Robinson comes back into contention after his back spasm he had in the previous, in the 3rd Test match, and didn't play in the 4th match. I think he must come into contention. But it'd be interesting to see what England do. I think the batting. I don't think England changed their batting lineup. Their batting lineup, their top 6 will remain the same. I think it's just this question of whether Robinson comes into the side, or Robinson or Anderson come into the side. Really, I think that's the only key decision really, and who drops out of the bowling unit. As you say, it'll probably be a question of whether Woakes is fit and Wood is fit, and the fact that Broad's played every single Test match. Mm-hmm. Conversely, with Australia, I mean. Effectively, Ed, they picked a side in the last Test match to not get beat in 3 days. They stacked it with batting, and I think that was obviously the right decision now because the weather come to save them. And you could argue that Mitch Marsh's knock has probably saved them the Test match and in the series. But I can't see Australia going with Green and Marsh in the side again. I think Australia will definitely have to bring a spinner in for the Oval. I think Todd Murphy definitely plays, but it's a question of who they actually leave out. I mean, I don't see Marsh and Green in the same side, and you can't really leave Mitch Marsh out. Mitch Marsh has batted 4 times in this series in 2 Test matches, 4 innings, and he's looked good in every innings. He scored a 50, he scored an absolutely fantastic 100. So really, the poster boy, Cameron Green, is probably going to be left out of this, which is going to be very, very interesting. So, I think there's question marks about both sides. I think the betting for the match is probably about right. I think there's probably a bit of value in some of the derivatives because I do think if we can second guess both sides, there'll probably be a little bit of value, especially into who's going to be top bowler, I think. Because I think, as you said, Ed, we could probably make a second guess about some of these players that are definitely not. I mean, Scotty Boland's never going to play for Australia again in England. I mean, he's never going to play. Mitch Stark looks little bit, as I say, off the plate. Does he play? Hazelwood bowled very, very well. So I think if we look at the both sides, there's probably a little bit of value there. But I think as regarding the to win the match, I'd shade England slightly. Is 130 value? Plus 130, probably not.
Okay. I do want to come back on that money line with Bet Rivers for the 5th test. But let's just do a bit of housekeeping for you. Give us a follow at Because We Win so you can win across all sports, not just cricket. At John Wright 15 on Twitter and myself at Cricket Betting on Twitter. And give us some love on the podcast provider of your choice. We're going to give you the best picks that we can find at the end of this show. So you've got to stick around for the value. It's 2 each. 2 from John, 2 from me. So don't miss the value. And we're going to be going through top run scorer, top wicket taker, as John just mentioned, some of the other player specials as well, maybe some man of the match prices for you. Back to that money line on the 5th test result, John. Surprised the draw is so short, plus 290. I mean, this is recency bias in its purest form, isn't it? The weather forecast isn't that bad.
Yes, I think the only reason the draw is that short is because we've had a draw in the last test match where the weather was appalling. There is a bit of rain in South London, but again, I think that both sides are so up for this that I think it's going to be a match that's going to be played at such pace. I think you could probably lose a day, maybe a day and a half, and probably still get a result. I think Australia will be bang up for this, and I think England will as well. I'd be amazed if this peters out to be a draw. The weather forecast is not as bad as it was in Manchester. So I think probably 290 is probably too shorted.
Okay. Let's tell you about the Oval pitch. If you're sort of just tuning into the Ashes series or taking a vague interest, you'll probably hear a lot about the Oval pitch being the best batting wicket in the country. Lots of people, by the way, used to play Test cricket for England, telling you what a great batting wicket is. The statistics tell a completely different story. I think in about six innings in 15 championship matches, in 15 innings across six matches in the championship, very few have seen scores of more than 350 this season. And that's historically the same case as well in test matches over the last 10 years. And it's 5th in terms of runs per wicket for your batters in England. So it's the 5th best batting wicket for 6 tests or more in the last 10 years. So it's not this road that everyone makes out, and if it's overcast, it will swing. So do bear that in mind, please. Let's look at top England run scorer in that first innings. I'm going to shout out some numbers for you. Joe Root plus 275 is always a swerve. It's nowhere close to what he does on win rate. Zach Crawley plus 400. Incredible innings at Old Trafford. And he may well fancy the wicket here. Harry Brook is a win rate bet at plus 450. Then we've got Ben Duckett 450 has gone a bit quiet. Ben Stokes is plus 500. Johnny Bairstow plus 800. Moeen Ali, the same price when he'll be batting at 3. John, someone batting at number 3 at plus 800?
Well, it should be value batting at 3. I mean, but I think at the Oval, I don't think a flash 40 for Moeen is actually going to win this. I think he's going to someone's going to probably need to score 100, probably 80 to 100 to win this. So I don't see Moeen. I mean, Moeen batted quite well in the first innings in Manchester, but again, he got to the point where he got 50 and then effectively, played a loose shot, and that's Moeen all over. I mean, I think he's just although, back in the day, he was a quality number 3 that bowled a little bit, but that's changed over the years. I think the sort of the explosion of white ball cricket has made him a little bit loose. So plus 800, he's probably value. I wouldn't play that myself. I put a line through Ben Duckett because I think his form at the beginning of the season, this Ashes series, has definitely petered out. Crawley batted superbly in the last test in Manchester, but I think plus 400, that's reflected in the price. The value, I think, for me is Stokes. I mean, Stokes has got more runs than anyone in the series. He doesn't bowl, and I think there's a responsibility there. I think I said in the previous show, I think he's the one that bats like a captain, and he bats the conditions when everyone else is sort of probably being a little bit gung-ho. So if I was having a bet on that particular market, I'd back Ben Stokes at plus 500 to be talking England back.
Yeah, his mindset has switched to full-time batter as well, by the way. Just some very interesting comments in the press this week saying that he doesn't bowl anymore. Well, we've not actually officially heard that before. So it looks like he's now just a batsman only. So it's a good shout from John. Let's look at top run scorer for Australia in your first innings, plus 250 for Steve Smith, who's been a major disappointment, just hasn't done it for Australia. Usman Khawaja, well, he's been a bit like his team, started off very, very well and then dropped off a cliff, plus 375. Travis Head, 163 against India on this ground at the start of the summer. Won him this market in that game, plus 425. Labuschagne, who has found his way now, plus 425. Warner, plus 600, who's had a dreadful series. And I think I'm going to point John to Mitchell Marsh at plus 700. I suspect that's where he's going.
Yes, I do. I mean, I think Mitch Marsh has been brilliant since he came into this side. I mean, he basically came into this side for an injury to Cameron Green, and now he's effectively he keeps his place in this side. And I think if Australia do bring the spinner in, I think it'd be Cameron Green that could be left out. You know, Mitch Marsh has got 100, a brilliant 100, a 50, and even in the two other innings, he's looked quite solid. You know, all four innings he's played in this series, he looks solid. I think plus 700 is the value. I agree. If you go down, Smith's too short. Khawaja's petered out. Head, yes, he got 160 against India in the World Chess Championship final, but I mean, majority of that India didn't bowl at him correctly, did they? They bowled up to him, and they didn't bowl it short. Once they bowled it short, you know, he'd already the cat was already out of the bag. He'd already got about 80. Labuschagne's the danger. I mean, Labuschagne, he's got no runs in this series, but he batted superbly in Manchester. The 100 that he got there is probably won Australia. Made Australia retain the Ashes. So he'd definitely be a runner, especially at that price at plus 425. But I'm going to go with Mitch Marsh at plus 700. I do think that represents a bit of value, and if he does get in, he scores very quickly, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. It's a good shout on Marsh. You just wouldn't be surprised at all to see him notch here on a decent wicket. Just talking about Labuschagne, his individual innings runs in the first innings available over 30.5 at plus 100. That is looking very cheap. Some of these Bet Rivers prices here are very, very cheap on players. Ben Stokes, your proper batsman now, over 27.5 at plus 100. That's very, very cheap. You'll see far bigger run quotes with other layers, by the way. And just for point of difference, Steve Smith over 36.5 plus 100. You'll probably see over 40.1.5 with other layers. So it's a really good market with Bet Rivers, this one. John, we'll come to some other markets as well in a minute, but you did highlight the top wicket taker as potential value if we could second guess some of these teams. And I think I'm going to second guess where you were going with it. And is that basically betting on the guy that you know is absolutely certain to be playing? Yes. And when it comes down to it, for top England first innings wicket taker, you've got Chris Woakes, all the threes, plus 333, with James Anderson, Mark Wood, Stuart Broad, the front three in the betting, and almost certainly all those three won't play. So, yeah. I mean, you could basically make a case for Chris Woakes on that basis alone.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Chris Woakes, for me, he's got 12 wickets in the two matches that he's played. You know, I mean, okay, you could probably argue that the oval pitch might not suit him, but I think, as you said, Ed, that we might not get a typical oval conditions in this test match because the weather forecast, it could be overcast, which could suit Chris Woakes. So, yes, I mean, I think Chris Woakes plays, plus 333 has got to be value because, as you say, you know, there's definitely going to be two at the front four in the betting. There's definitely going to be two of them are not going to play. So, and Moeen's definitely going to play, isn't he? Which for me, Moeen at plus 550, first innings wickets, he's no value at all. For me, he should be at least 10. So you're ruling out him, and you're probably going to lose two of the seamers. So yeah, I like Woakes at plus 333. I mean, there's rumours in the press that he is a bit stiff after this test match, and understandably so. He's played back-to-back Test matches. He's 34 years of age. But if he does play, 3-3-3 for me is definitely value, because he's definitely been very, very potent for England, and he's got those 12 wickets in the 2 matches.
Stuff top wicket taker Australia first. He's at the Oval. These are your Bet Rivers prices and a bit of commentary from me before we hand over to John for his view. Pat Cummins plus 175 is your favourite. I'm sorry to say, but he's been an absolute stinker of a favourite throughout this series. He's let punters down in a big way at those prices. He's copped once, and that's not good enough for us, I'm afraid. Even though he's a terrific bowler, he hasn't done it. Mitchell Starc will look like he was injured at Old Trafford. He's plus 200. Hazlewood probably coming to the fore now. It seems to be tuned up nicely, unlike some of his teammates. Plus 325, could have a big game at the Oval. Scott Boland plus 375. Todd Murphy plus 550. Any other business there for you, John?
No, I mean, for me, Hazlewood sticks out like a sore thumb, because when all the bowlers were going around the park in Manchester last week, he got Pfeiffer. He got 5 wickets. He was the best bowler by miles. As you go down that list, you said there, Boland's not going to play. Starc probably carrying a bit of an injury. Cummins now, as you say, looks spent. He's played these 5 Test matches off the back. He's captain. He's had to face the press, the media. He's got so much on his plate. If this was, I imagine the ODIs that follow this Test series, I imagine, even though it's a World Cup year, isn't it, Ed? I think he'll probably rest. You could probably, he won't rest. They won't rest their captain in an Ashes game that's still an Ashes Test match is still alive. But you could justify it because Cummins does look spent. So plus 175 for me is too short. For me, Hazlewood's got to be the value because he hasn't played. He's only played 3 Test matches. He's fairly fresh. He hasn't played a lot of red ball cricket, as you said, Ed. Didn't really hardly play in the IPL for RCB, so he's fairly fresh. And the fact that he had 2 days off in the last Test match where there wasn't a lot of the bowling done, I'd suggest that he still would be fresh. So for me, 325 plus 325 Josh Hazlewood is the value in that market.
Okay, well, let's bring you into a player of the match with Bet Rivers. These are your prices. Josh Hazlewood, let's start off at plus 1,600. May well have a shout if Australia is to win this game. He's going to have a big one, I suspect. We talked about Ben Stokes for runs, plus 1,000, plus 1,000 for England to be player of the match. Any picks for you, John? Labuschagne plus 1,400, a batsman who could do well. Let's find Mitch Marsh's price for you as well. We've talked him up plus 1,100.
I thought, looking at that particular market, I thought Marsh at plus 1,100 could be value because he will bowl. He will bowl a few overs and he'll bat in the top 6. I agree with you. I think Stokes. I think if England do win this Test match and Stokes gets runs, I think he could easily be man of the match just on the basis of the way he's captained the side throughout the series. I think that's not a bad shout. So for me, if I was picking one from each side, I'd pick Stokes for England, and because Joe Root seems to be a little bit short, and I'd back Mitch Marsh for Australia. They'd be my 2. In one, you're going on to the specials, Ed. In one of the specials, I definitely think there's a little bit of value. There's a market there where they give points to players for all 3 disciplines: 20 points for a wicket, 10 points for a catch, and a point for every run scored. Now, Joe Root's market is over 115.5, is minus 118, and under 115.5 is also minus 118. Now, if you look at Joe Root's Test average, Joe Root's Test average at the moment is 52, right? So arguably, you could say that he could be in for at least 90 to 100 runs. He's got 9 catches in this series in 4 Test matches. So the average is in this series 2 catches per match. And also, more strikingly, I think he's definitely under bowled. And I think the fact that he's got 4 wickets in this Test series already, and he bowled very well in Manchester when he came on, didn't he, Ed? And arguably at the Oval, you think England will use spin, and you could see Joe Root actually, especially in the second innings, turning his arm over quite considerably, especially if Moeen's not bowling particularly well. So I thought that was value. I thought Joe Root over 115.5 points was a bit of value, because I think he could pick up points in all three disciplines, Ed.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great shout. I think it's 58 test wickets, and every time you hear that stat, everyone says, well, he should have more than that. I think you're right, John. I think he bowls a chunk of overs here to help take the pressure off Moeen, if nothing else, particularly with that sore finger, which occasionally might be bothering him. Listen, this is your Ashes preview show for the final time for about 2.5 years. So lap it up. This is the 5th Ashes test. All the best picks for the Oval, which starts on Thursday with Bet Rivers. We're also coming back this week to do Major League Cricket as we get to the business end. The playoffs are almost with us. We've been canning, we switched sides from the Unicorns to the Freedom, and the Freedom are in the playoffs. The Unicorns bowling too pricey in the end, and we had to jump ship. But we're going to have you all the latest ways to play and the best picks for the MLC. For now, John, it's best 2 picks, please, for the 5th Ashes test from the Oval on Thursday.
Well, I'm going to go. My first pick is going to be Australian bowler. I just think that Josh Hazlewood at plus 325, bearing in mind his performance in the last test in a poor Australia bowling performance where he got 5 wickets. So I'm going to go for Josh Hazlewood to be top Australian wicket taker in the first innings at plus 325. And my other bet will be that special. I just think that Joe Root is very cheap there. So that's just a special that Bet Rivers are doing. It's over 115.5 points, Joe Root at minus 118. And that's both innings as well. So you're cheering on Joe Root to get runs, wickets, and whole catches.
Good stuff. I'm going to go for England. I think they might just pinch this one at plus 130 with Bet Rivers with my final selection. Let's take about a little bit of that plus 1600. Josh Hazlewood, man of the match, just in case I'm wrong. Something a bit of a saver for you for the 5th test. A nice price to get stuck into. That's the 5th Ashes test preview done for you on How's That, the Bet Rivers Cricket Show. Don't forget to come back for the MLC Betting Hub this week, discussing all the playoff news, angles, and ways to play. We'll see you then.